He wasted $8,000 and 11 months of his life. And then he had to scramble to get a bankruptcy filed very, very quickly because he was being sued and didn't have a lot of time. So I consider them mostly to be scams. I think no one in Florida should ever be borrowing from a home equity line of credit to pay credit cards or medical bills or personal loans. That's crazy because the bankruptcy exemptions specifically protect those for you. Most people don't really realize all of the ways that creditors can do that. They need to make money off of you, not just once, but every single day. Bankruptcy lawyers are going to make money off of you one time.
Welcome back to Law Unpacked. I'm your host, Sean DeVries, and today we have an incredible guest joining us. Adrienne Hines, also known as the Ladylike Lawyer. Welcome, and we're so excited to have you.
Thank you, Sean.
Adrienne's been practicing bankruptcy law for over 30 years. She's been a 30-year practitioner, and she didn't start out in bankruptcy, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But Adrienne, we're so excited to have you on, and I know I shared with you, we met for the first time in Hilton Head, but I've been following you a long time, and the first thing I said is you got to come on to my show because we have a lot of folks that really just want to hear from you and get those great insights that you give your clients every day, and especially the rest of the world through your social media presence.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I love any opportunity to talk about what it is you and I both do and why it is so helpful and beneficial. I really enjoy this. So thank you for having me on.
So I want to take you back to the start of your career. How did you end up practicing law? I think that's always an interesting question for everybody because we all have our own story on how we got here. So how did you end up practicing law? And then we'll segue into where you got into the bankruptcy part of it because I know you were with a big firm. And so tell us.
Yeah, well, first off, I'm not quite practicing 30 years yet as a woman of a certain age. I want to point out that I'm under the 30-year mark, but I'm getting up there. So, it's not that big of a deal. My parents were divorced when I was very young. And I remember being in the second grade, and I remember being in performing, doing something like creating a little book report that I had to like act it out. And I really never forgot my second grade teacher looked me dead in the eye and she said, "You're either going to be an actress or a lawyer." And I was so spunky in that time in my life that I thought, well, I live in Kansas City at that point in time, and I don't know how I'm going to become an actress in Kansas City, but I look around and see lawyers everywhere, so I guess that's what I'm going to be. And I really internalized what my second grade teacher said, and I felt that I was going to be a lawyer. And when I was 12 years old, my mother met the man that she ended up marrying, and he happened to be a lawyer. And he was an amazing man. He really, raised me. And I felt that it was serendipity because, I had known that I was going to be a lawyer since I was in the second grade. And I felt that, this person had been kind of put in my life to help me move on forward. So I actually it was all my idea to become a lawyer, but I went to college and law school, and then right out of law school, I came and worked for my stepfather. And that's really how my career started.
Well, that's incredible. It's funny because you say, it was your second grade teacher and I can say my mom, when I graduated law school, and I didn't even know I did this, but back in like fourth grade, what do you want to be when you grew up? And I put an attorney down there and, and lost my way for a little while, but then came back and here we are, 20 years later.
Well, I have to point out that my second grade teacher said I would be an actress or lawyer. And I definitely think that in this phase of my life, I'm starting to merge the two a little bit. I don't think we saw social media back when I was in the second grade being in our forefront, but I do think that these days that I am really I'm living up to my second grade teacher's expectations. I think that's where we're at.
Have you reached out to her since you've been practicing? Is she still around? Because I think that call might be a great one to be on your show and say, I need to tell you what you told me and what happened in my life.
I think I need to go track down Mrs. Thomas from Shawnee Mission Elementary School in Kansas City. If she's listening, follow me and reach out to me, because I would love to say hi to her. But that is really what kind of guided my, my career. And it was just a random transient, comment at one point in time. But I think I clearly had a personality that probably lent itself to arguing a lot.
Everybody thinks attorneys argue, but I hate to argue. At least it's funny because
Same.
my wife says to me, she's like, I don't understand. You have difficult conversations all day long with people, but you have such a hard time having difficult conversation, like when it comes to friends and family and that sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, I can space myself away. That's my work. That's not, going to affect, it all affects me, but
Exactly.
I've got to go home to these people.
Exactly. Exactly. It's complicated. I'm not much of an arguer either. I would say I'm more passionate and very determined to try to help people, whether they want it or not. I'm one of those people.
Well, whether they want it or not, or really know what's good for them, and I think that's half our battle is
Right.
education, right? I
Exactly.
think
It really is.
watching your channel, I could tell you 90% of what you do is education, as well as myself. So,
Absolutely. That's what we're out here doing. I think, you and I are out here just putting out real, truthful information about what we know. And it's a revolutionary idea. I just think it's, we're starting to be able to bring something that we know is extremely beneficial and helpful to so many people. We're able to get it in front of a lot of people. Back in the day, people had to figure out that they wanted to file bankruptcy and they had to come and find us. And so this is just a whole new way of helping people see that there's other options. And I love it. I love it.
well, I can tell you that anytime that you go live, and I was there with you, and you get thousands of people on your channel just coming and just to be able to spread it's like spreading the bankruptcy gospel. I'm going to call it
I
just
know.
getting that out there to.
It absolutely is. I was I think I've always been a bit of an advocate, a bit of a, you know, rebel rouser trying to help people. So I absolutely agree. It's amazing and I love it.
So let's go back. So we're at your stepdad's law firm. How did you, where you were there for quite some time and then you decided to go out on your own? Is that right? Or was there?
Yeah. So I actually started work. I started working for my stepfather's firm right when I graduated from law school. That was 28 years ago, 28 and a half years ago. And But when I had been in law school, I had interned for a semester with one of our local bankruptcy judges. And to be clear, Sean, I had only agreed to do that internship because it sounded fancy, because it was a federal judge. Because I
Sure.
had the opportunity to intern with a state appeals court judge, but I chose bankruptcy because I thought it was going to get me further in life. Honestly, that's why I chose it. And I showed up for the first day of my internship. And Sean, I spent an entire semester in a judge's chambers and still didn't understand most of what was happening. I didn't get it, honestly, even in law school, because I hadn't had a lot of experience with money yet. I hadn't bought my own home, I hadn't bought my own car. I really hadn't done these things. And money wasn't really my strong suit, and I didn't understand it. But I remained very, very close friends with that judge. He was a mentor to me because he had been from the town that we live in, and we shared that we both were commuting an hour. So we talked a lot. He was just a really good mentor to me. And I went with my dad, and my dad was a workers' comp attorney. And I became a workers' comp attorney. And I actually, as of 8 days ago, I was a workers' comp specialist in the state of Ohio, something I'd worked very hard for. But along the way, our workers' comp system in Ohio is very fragile and it is falling apart very, very quickly before my eyes. And along the way, I had to start filing bankruptcies for people because in the workers' comp system, your income can be very fragile, your situation can be fragile. And I was trying to find people to send my clients to file for bankruptcy. And I had a lunch one day with my bankruptcy judge mentor, and he just looked at me and said, "You need to start doing it. You just need to start doing it. You do, this. You can figure it out. You need to start doing it." And so, I didn't want to disappoint him, so I started doing it, and I found that bankruptcy was truly became my passion. I continued to do workers' comp work until June 30th of 2024, which is not that long ago. And up until that point in time, I'd been in a law firm with my stepfather. We had partners. I was a named partner on the firm. My name was on the side of the building. I was on the loans. I had all of the big girl responsibilities of a big law firm. And this social media stuff was starting to really capture my attention. And as my social media accounts were growing, I was really beginning to realize that workers' comp might be in my rearview mirror. I just wasn't sure I could keep doing it. And so I really leaned in and I found some other ways to help people. And I went to my husband and he said, "You're happiest doing bankruptcy work. Let's find a way for you to leave your job." And that's what we did. And I ended up as a partner. I surrendered my partnership shares, and I ended up going to an of counsel relationship with my law firm, meaning I'm still in the same exact place and I still have the same staff. And I just rent everything from them so that they don't have to pay me a salary. I'm responsible for my own stuff. And I love it. It's the first time I've ever been out on my own, and I'm doing what I love to do, which is bankruptcy. Can you believe I love doing? You love doing bankruptcy,
I
don't
do love
you?
doing bankruptcy.
Can you believe we love doing bankruptcy?
It's been a life changer, and you don't know my entire story, but I've shared a little bit. Growing up, my parents were, my dad worked in a factory, mom was a nurse, dad lost his job, factory. We grew up in upstate New York, factory moved down to Atlanta, and so he was out of a job for a short time period, and I saw firsthand how bankruptcy can help families and help, and that's how I ended up coming back to it because when I first started practicing, we did bankruptcy, but I saw the market moving away at that point in time.
Right,
We're in
right.
Florida. When I first started practicing, it was the 2008 era, and there's all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
foreclosures, all sorts of bankruptcies, and then we see, okay, the market's better, bankruptcies start decreasing, and then the real estate market picks up. And what's crazy is, so I came back in 2020 when COVID happened, thinking, oh my gosh, the bankruptcy market's going to come back. This is going to be great. It can help so many people, but it never came. And it
Yeah.
was crazy that 2020 was the lowest number of filings that we've had in the last 20 years. Um,
Yeah, I definitely think bankruptcy lawyers thought that 2020 was going to drive a lot of people into bankruptcy. I think it goes to show that there were things that were being done at the federal level that were helping to spare people. But I'm sure you've seen, as I've seen, as much of a break as we got in 2020, 2021, and even starting into 2022, man, the floodgates opened up, and it's because there was just a delayed reaction. It was just a delaying of people's misery through COVID because they didn't have a lot of needs and they had resources. But now here we are with inflation, and we've got existential dread, right? Like every time we turn around, there's some existential dread, and that all compounds into the financial category, making this a very complicated, anxious, overly stressed out, full of debt society. We've got a lot of people who are really on the brink right now with a lot of different factors, and they need to be talking to bankruptcy lawyers so they can let some of this anxiety out and figure out a way to move forward. That's what I'm seeing right now.
I mean, there's so many ways that bankruptcy to be used as a tool or as a bust to help better one's condition, and there's so many stigmas still surrounding bankruptcy, and we're going to get into a bunch of those here in a little bit. But it's amazing how much education or how much disinformation has been out there about bankruptcy. Let's return it. I mean, we're out here trying to preach the goods about it, but the only reason we have to tell everybody how great it is or how it can help them is because there's so much disinformation out there.
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about the fact that I think Monopoly really did us dirty. I really honestly think that the game Monopoly put into people the thought that bankruptcy is actually worse than jail, right? It's worse to go bankrupt in Monopoly than it is to go to jail.
Hmm.
And that, along with the fact that you and I know how predatory the unsecured lending market is, right? We unsecured lenders in the consumer lending industry. We understand how predatory that is. Most people don't understand how predatory it is, and the lenders themselves have worked very, very hard to convince you that they're not predatory and that you're a bad person if you don't pay the predatory manipulative debt that they've sucked you into. And so that's usually the place that I start from when I'm trying to help people become more comfortable. But I do think it is a concerted effort on behalf of consumer lenders to vilify bankruptcy, obviously. And that's what we're seeing. People who defend the banks, it's so painful for me to watch. It is so painful to watch somebody come in and defend a bank. It's not the right world for that.
Not only is it the bank, but it's the third party market, right? That the so and
Right,
so bought the
right.
debt from so and so, and now they're coming after them 15, 20 years after, when they even were a
Mm-hmm.
statutory, statute of limitations run. Yet we still see lawsuits filed for that. It's
Yeah, people don't, I mean, and the statute of limitations, the tolling, the ability for creditors to come back and come after you 20 years later, most people don't really realize all of the ways that creditors can do that. They think there's rules out there protecting them. They don't know that payday lender, Lendmark, or whoever it is on the corner in a strip mall, they're going to charge you 499% interest, and there's no laws that say they can't, right? And so when we start to understand how deeply predatory and dangerous this debt is, we start to understand why bankruptcy exists and how important it is as a safety valve in our capitalistic economy.
well, which moves me on to my next point, and so you're now on your own, or you're of counsel, practicing
Mhm.
solely in bankruptcy, and now the ladylike lawyer is created. Tell me, how did that come to fruition?
So through COVID, I had teenage twins, 18-year-old twins, and so obviously two young adults in my household were going straight to social media during COVID. It was their senior year of high school. It was all of the things. So there was a lot of sadness, a lot of everything. We all experienced it. And I started to just kind of pay a lot of attention to what they were doing, a lot more attention. I was always fun. I always had a good time on Snapchat, and I dabble over here and I dabble over there, but I wasn't really a big social media person. And I started to realize that TikTok, particularly, Instagram was so glossy and fancy that it felt hard to live up to. And I liked what I saw on TikTok because people were kind of authentic and honest, and people were giving like sitting down with a camera and giving you a piece of information. And I loved that. I really was drawn to that. So I started watching TikToks. I was obsessed with my curly hair, how to make my hair more curly, how to put makeup on, women over 40. And I was just picking up all these new tips. And I knew I was probably going to eventually start to make some videos because, I got that in me, right? And I thought I was going to have a
Your
channel,
second grade teacher knew that you were going to.
right? Everybody, I mean, it was written in the
Miss Thomas,
stars.
if you're listening.
Yeah, at the my very first video is me running. I was making food and I was juicing, making juices. I was just kind of doing the things that I do throughout the day because that's what I saw other people doing, and it just made me happy, even if nobody else was watching them. And one day I mentioned my job, and that is when the light bulb I saw a tremendous amount of inquiries, attention, and I thought, oh. And I have to say, Sean, I was very naive because I'd been practicing for a very long time. And because I did two areas of law, it never really bothered me, the ups and downs of bankruptcy. I just always had a practice. Sometimes it was bigger, sometimes it was smaller. But once I realized that people were really interested in what I was talking about, I realized that they had no knowledge. Like everything they knew was wrong. And that was shocking to me because the people who had scheduled appointments with me for 20 years made their way to me. And I began to, on their own, brave, and they walked in the door and had an appointment with me. I never had to have conversations with people thinking about talking, thinking about going to bankruptcy, or stopping people on the street and saying, "Do you have debt? Stop and listen to me." So I began to realize how much misinformation was out there, what people really thought of bankruptcy. I didn't honestly know that people were so afraid of it. I mean, I knew people were afraid of it, but I didn't really know. And so I thought, oh, I'm gonna help people understand this better. And that's really what I did. That is that as a personality that I have. I really do like to help people, and I saw that I knew a lot about this subject, and I thought, like, half the people who come through my page should probably be filing bankruptcy, but they don't know it. And so it became my mission in life to take away the confusion, the stigma, the mystery about bankruptcy, to talk about it, as candidly and as unemotionally as possible, so that people don't feel so afraid of what this option might be. If you're afraid of it, you won't go find out more about it. If you are shamed or embarrassed about your debt, you won't talk to the people who have the information that can truly help you. And so I wanted to take shame and embarrassment away from the discussion of debt. I wanted people to understand that bankruptcy is a normal thing, and I'm a regular old bankruptcy lawyer, and I do this every day, and you will be safe down this path too. And I also wanted people to understand, what their rights are. I want them to advocate for themselves, because, as you know, we got plenty of lawyers in our field who probably aren't, doing the best that they could. And the more people understand about it, the better they can advocate and help themselves in conversations with their own lawyers. So that's really what I ended up doing. And I left my full-time practice because I enjoyed doing it so much. And I've decided that half of my day is spent making content, and the other half of my day is spent being a bankruptcy lawyer. And that's what I do now.
Well, that's incredible. I envy that you can set half of your schedule to make content, but it really shows. Like I said, I've followed you for over a year now before we even met, and I didn't follow you because I knew, let's look up Adrian Hines, a Lady Like Lawyer. I followed you because you were in my feed, and you were in, uploading content that I relate it with, or my clients relate it with, and so, what are some of the things that you still hear people asking about, even though you've been making these videos for 4 years? What do you still hear from some of your viewers and your guests?
Well, the two most common questions that are usually blurted out as a statement slash question is, isn't bankruptcy going to ruin my life? That's number one. And won't I lose my house and my car? And that's number two. Those are the two most common beliefs, without doubt. And I'm sure that that's your experience too. Is that your
Oh,
experience?
absolutely, absolutely.
And I will say that being on social media requires a tremendous amount of patience, because one of the issues with social media is you're constantly having new people come into your space. And so every single day I get the same questions over and over and over. So part of what I do is try to determine how many, do I keep answering the same? I got to answer some questions about, will it ruin your life, and will you lose your house or car? I have to do videos like that so regularly for the people who are coming through who still need a primer. It's almost like that movie 50 First Dates. I got to get
One of my
people
favorite movies.
understanding. I love it. I love it. But at the very end, and she woke up and there was a VCR, and, something came on, there was a note and everything. Like, that's kind of how I feel like I'm trying to handle all new followers, because I have so many followers who know a lot because I've got thousands of videos. But every day there's people who know nothing, and I have to be speaking to them, and I have to help them, and I have to find the patience, because that is the one thing I think when we deal with something over and over and over, we say, oh, didn't you see the video last week? And
Hmm.
so, but it's also why it's fun, because you get to just keep doing it every day.
Well, which is interesting. You're in Ohio, correct? What is
Correct.
so here in Florida, we have one of the best homestead laws where your homestead is 100% protected in bankruptcy. And I
Yeah,
know that's
yeah,
one of the best in the country. What's
yeah.
Ohio's homestead protection? 'Cause, we often say you're not going to lose your house, which is 99% the case.
Yeah, it's really easy for me to say that. We don't have an unlimited exemption like you do and like Texas does, but we have a pretty generous exemption. Our exemption is $161,000 per debtor. So it is, fortunately for me, I'm not rubbing up against the homestead exemption very often. Everything else we've got is very low. Our car exemption is only $4,500. Our cash on hand is only $500. Our wild card is only $1,500. But our home exemption is big, and that is a tremendous advantage. Illinois, Missouri, they have 50. I know Illinois does. It's either Missouri or Mississippi has a $15,000 exemption in your home. And that bankruptcy is going to look a lot different for somebody in Illinois than it would for somebody either in Florida or Ohio. And that's why it's hard being a lawyer on social media, because people are going to have different experiences based on where they live. And so you can give as much information as possible, but still people need to understand that these are just big umbrella concepts. And to get clarity, you have to move towards a bankruptcy lawyer in your community who understands your exemptions, your means test, etc. It's really important to turn inward towards your own community to find the lawyer.
And I think, we were just sitting here talking like lawyers, but we never actually said what an exemption was. So I feel like we need to tell our listeners we're talking about exemptions. What is an exemption?
Yeah. So we were talking about myths about bankruptcy, and so let's back up for your audience. There's really two kinds of bankruptcies that regular, average people, small business owners, Joe Schmoes like you and I are going to file. It's going to be a Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. And you and I both know that Chapter 7 is the easiest. It's the best one if you can qualify, but it requires that your income be below a certain limit. And if your household income is below a certain limit, then congratulations, you've passed test 1, but now we have to look at the things you own, because a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is technically called a liquidation. And I think that's where people get the concept that they're going to take your house, they're going to take your car, because they understand the word liquidation, or they've heard that part. But most people don't understand or recognize that if they qualify to file a bankruptcy, Chapter 7, and they move forward with it, that there are bankruptcy exemptions that every state has set forth that tells you what you can protect in your state if you file bankruptcy. So the exemptions are the most important thing after we determine that you can qualify to file a Chapter 7. Now we are trying to make sure that everything you own is going to be safe. And that's really what people think. They think you're going to lose your house and your car, because we know that that's possible. But as you and I recognize, that's not really how it works. And if you have a good lawyer and you understand the process, you're not going to lose anything. You don't lose anything if you go in planning and you understand what's going on. You might have to change, you might have to sell something, you might have to do some things, but it's not going to be what you think it is. You control the process. So we look at all your exemptions. So in Ohio, if we have a $161,000 exemption, that means if I'm a single person and I own a home by myself and it has no mortgage on it, it can be worth up to $161,000. And if I qualify under the income limit to file a 7, my house will be safe. My house would not be safe in Illinois, because Illinois' exemptions are very different.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's kind of an overview. Yeah.
no, that was great. I always like to, when I'm talking to clients, I always say the Chapter 7 is the gold standard of bankruptcy. Now we have a
Yeah.
Chapter 13 as well, and that's for those that don't fit in the Chapter 7. But I really like to say
Yeah.
that it's kind of, if we
Yeah.
could fit somebody in that we do.
Yeah, and that's a sign of a good lawyer too. I want everybody out there hearing that one of the concerns that I have is that I want people to understand the difference between a 7 and a 13. And I want people to understand exactly, the very limited circumstances in which you should be looking at a 13. Because I do think a lot of people end up in Chapter 13s who should not be there. And I think that doesn't help the practice itself. And I think it helps to perpetuate bad feelings about the bankruptcy process. And I want to make sure that people are doing what's right for them, and understanding the process more.
So can you explain just a little bit about what a Chapter 13? Because I want to have a deeper discussion, but I don't want to leave our guests hanging
Yeah.
in the wind there as to
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So, Chapter 7, the first thing we have to do is pass that income test, right? So, if you don't pass the income test, that's the first reason you would look at a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. You have debt. That's why you went to a bankruptcy lawyer. But if you filed but you cannot file a Chapter 7 because your household income is too high. In that case, you're going to look at a Chapter 13, or you're going to go home and go find something else. But if you want to continue down the bankruptcy road, then a Chapter 13 bankruptcy is filed, and you would end up making a payment every month for the next 5 years. And at the end of that 5 years, what's not paid off goes away. The payment that you pay is calculated by a federal formula based on your household income, your household expenses, as compared against the standard for your area. So basically, if you make more money than the numbers allow you to make, then you're looking at a Chapter 13. But remember, when we're talking about 7, there's a second test, that equity or asset test. You got to make sure your house or your car is going to be safe. So what if they're not? What if you live in Ohio and you have a $200,000 house and you live alone? You're the only person who owns it, and you don't owe any money on it. You inherited it. You're older. It's yours. If you have debt and you need to file for bankruptcy in the state of Ohio, there's a portion of it that would not be protected because our exemption is $161,000. If your house is worth $200,000, then if you were to file a Chapter 7, they would take your house. They'd sell it and give you your $161,000 back, but keep the difference. So that difference, instead of going into a 7 and allowing the court to take your house, you go into a Chapter 13 and you pay back to your creditors that which they would have gotten if you'd filed a 7. So if you had filed a 7, you had a $200,000 house, you had a $161,000 exemption. So in theory, your creditors would have gotten maybe around 40 grand, probably less, but about 40 grand. So if you have something that is too valuable for your state's exemptions, your only option to get rid of your debt or deal with your debt is to go into a 13 and pay the court that which they would have gotten if you'd file a 7. So in this case, it'd be about $39,000. If you're under the income limit, you go into a 13 so you can pay the unprotected equity to keep something while getting rid of the rest of your debt. If you're over the limit, you're going to be in a 13 making a payment based on what a financial formula says you can afford. And that's how it works. At the end of 5 years or at the end of your bankruptcy, all the rest of the debt that's general and unsecured debt, like credit cards, medical bills, payday loans, that kind of stuff, all that goes away. That's the advantage of a Chapter 13.
Just takes 5 years, but
It just
but
takes 5 years.
again, you probably didn't have the opportunity to file a Chapter 7, or you've done your due diligence to know that you couldn't file a Chapter 7 because, you mentioned it earlier. There's a lot of attorneys that might put people in a Chapter 13 that don't belong in a Chapter 13.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and that's frustrating. So I want people to know, and that's a very common conversation I have with my followers on my social media. I try to respond to every comment myself. I respond to every message right now. I'm still able to do that. I think there's going to come a time when I can't. But I'm having those conversations with people. When people ask me, what happens to my car in a Chapter 13? I come back and I make videos, but I also comment back, why are you in the 13? Because I want people to have to think about that. Because whether or not, any random question you have about a Chapter 13 plan is going to depend on why you're there, right? So I'm trying to help people understand Chapter 7, means test, exemptions, Chapter 13. How do we triangulate and get rid of this debt and get it out of your life so you can turn around and build wealth? That's the point here. That is the point. We need people to get through debt very, very quickly so they can get to the other side so they can build wealth and, robustly save for their retirement and do all the things, right?
Well,
So
which
that's
is a
why.
great segue into what does build wealth, or what is the other side of bankruptcy. I mean, we've gone to, bankruptcy misconception is that my life is going to end with bankruptcy, but really there's this whole new beginning. So tell us about that.
Um, let me tell you. I'm going to give you a metaphor. I use this sometimes on my lives, and I've kind of honed it, and I think it helps people understand because most people think that bankruptcy will ruin your life, right? They think of it as a fiery car crash, and you will never rise from that. It's over. Your financial life is over. But let's pretend that you get in your financial car the day you turn 18, and this is a metaphor, but you get in your car, you get behind the wheel, and you drive out of your driveway. And you're driving through your community, and you're figuring stuff out. And you're new, and you're kind of baby finance. And you're kind of figuring things out. And you're making your way to the highway because the highway is your future. It is the American dream. It's starting that business, it's getting married, it's all the things you imagine in your mind as your future, your American dream. So you take your little financial car and you get over to the big highway, you've made it there, you go up the ramp and you're in that right lane, right? We got a 4-lane highway here and you're in the right one and you don't even know what you're doing, right? Cars are flying past you and you're starting to get a little bit more comfortable, as time's going by, and you're putting a little bit more gas in there, and you're starting to pass people, and you're starting to get more comfortable, and you're getting into a real good funk, a real good roll. You left in New York, you're on your way to California, that's your future. And you're actually so good at this now. You're so familiar with your car. You're doing great. You're in that 3rd lane over, right? There's only one more lane where people are those are really the fast people. You're zipping around semi trucks and you're doing all this stuff, and all of a sudden the lights come on in your car. You're in the 3rd lane. You're in the fast lane, right? The lights come on your car. I think that most people think that bankruptcy is you crashing on this highway. But what most people really do is they put their foot on the gas. They do not acknowledge the red lights. They don't acknowledge the smoke coming out of the engine. And they're in a very dangerous place, where they're at. And they're trying to hold steady in between, the Autobahn guys and the BMWs flying past them on the left and the semis with the double trailers on the right. And they're pushing down on the gas, thinking that they're going to still get to their American dream that way. And if we take a step back, right, we know that that's not going to happen. Your car is not going to keep just magically working if there's a problem. And so bankruptcy is not crashing on the highway. Bankruptcy is putting your blinker on, making your way over to the side, getting off at the next exit, and calling AAA. Because once we fix the car, and that's what bankruptcy is, stopping, fixing the car, you're going to get back on that financial highway. But you're not going to get on it, in New York. You made it all the way to Ohio. You're like out. You're over by me right now. So bankruptcy is what fixes your car and allows you to get back onto that highway. You've lost a little bit of time. That's okay. That's okay. But if you stayed on that highway trying to press your foot on the gas, how much time are you going to lose, right? You're never going to be able to buy that house. You're never going to be able to start that business. You're never going to be able to send your kids to college if you don't solve this problem right now. The longer you wait, the worse and more expensive the fixes are going to be. So that's what bankruptcy is. And that's how I try to explain it to people. It's called a fresh start for a reason. It's not called fall on your face and flounder around and lose the rest of your life. It's called a fresh start. So people need to understand that it truly is how you go from this crappy situation that you're in. And you must be in a crappy situation because you're calling me. You're in a crappy situation, or you're watching me, or you're thinking about this. If you're in a crappy situation, then bankruptcy is what takes you away from that situation and puts you back into a good situation where you can start building your dream again. And you haven't lost a lot of time. And so that's really, I think, a very visual way to explain to people how beneficial bankruptcy is. It's not the end. And when we're talking about myths and misconceptions, the question really becomes, what are the cons to filing bankruptcy? I get that question a lot. Sean.
Yeah, that's a great
And I'm going
question.
to ask it of you. I'm going to ask it of you. What are the cons of filing for bankruptcy as opposed to not? And I'm going to put this in the context. What are the cons of filing bankruptcy if you have unmanageable unsecured debt? What are the cons?
I don't, I'm in the same boat. I don't see cons with when it comes to qualifying somebody
Yeah.
for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I
It's a
think
it's a magic wand for them, is what I think. I'm like, this is amazing. And whenever I'm asked what the cons are, my answer is always the stigma and the self hate. It's the stigma and the self hate are the worst parts of bankruptcy. So if we could find a way to take that down a couple of notches, people would understand that you and I struggle to find a con, right? People say, oh, your credit score will be ruined. No, no, no. Your credit score sucks now. Bankruptcy will actually increase your credit. It's very likely to increase your credit score. So that's not going to happen. It doesn't ruin your life. You do have to rebuild your credit. You have a responsibility to rebuild it. But our clients, you and I both are working, we have a lot of the same things in place. We have a lot of the same resources available to our clients, and we provide a lot of resources so that they can get back to a 720 credit score in 12 to 24 months. If you can buy a car the day after you file bankruptcy, and if you can get a credit card, when you're ready to, and if you can get a credit score back up to 780, if you can buy a house in 2 to 4 years after filing a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, then what is the con of filing a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? Because you can't buy a house right now if you got $40,000 in unsecured debt. You can't afford it. You can't take care of it. You can't find it. You can't put carpet in it. You can't put furniture in it. And you won't be able to until you deal with the debt. And the debt has to be going away very, very. Let me say this: minimum payments are not an option. Minimum payments are going to grow the balance. And because most likely you're going to continue to use the card. So there needs to be a stopping point. There needs to be a reset. You need to pull over and call AAA.
we've talked a lot about bankruptcy but I want to say bankruptcy is we're people again, we have that magic wand, right? I wish I could be like, no stigma, no stigma. You're it's not there. Don't do it. But I often find that most people use bankruptcy as the last resort. So we get a lot of clients that have already been through a credit consolidation. What are your thoughts on debt consolidation or credit consolidation? And do you see, like I see, most of the people end up with us anyways?
Yes, most of them end up with us anyway. I think you're probably in the same position as me. Up until COVID, the only contact I had with debt settlement or debt consolidation were people coming to file bankruptcy because they just tried it and it didn't work. And most people lose a lot of time and a lot of money. I had a client just last month, and he had been paying $755 a month to a debt consolidation company, and this was his 11th month. And it was in November, it was about 2 months ago. And like on November 2nd, he sent the $755 payment. And then 3 days later, he was sued by Discover. He had 28 days, to come up with a solution after he had just sent a $755 payment, which was his 11th payment. And he had spent almost, 8 grand over the last 11 months. So he'd wasted $8,000, and he still had to pay me. He still had to find more money for me. So he wasted $8,000 and 11 months of his life. And then he had to scramble to get a bankruptcy filed very, very quickly because he was being sued and didn't have a lot of time. So I consider them mostly to be scams. I think I think that there are a few out there. I think when you are dealing with a lawyer who is very open and honest and is walking you through everything, and you're able to see the accounts and you know exactly what you're paying for, I think debt settlement can work if you're dealing with less than 10 grand and you've got like 3 creditors or less. But the more creditors you have, the more difficult it becomes because everybody has to agree. And as you know, There's absolutely no laws that require a credit card company to take less than what you owe. So they don't have to do what the debt settlement company asks them to do. And I think that's the part most people don't understand. So I'm not a big fan of debt settlement. In fact, I've got a pretty clear point of view on this. You're right. People wait until the end to talk to a bankruptcy lawyer. So let's tick through the ways that you can get rid of debt, right? Number one is to budget your way out. Number two is to borrow money. And if you're going to borrow money, you're going to do one of three things. You can either take a consolidation loan, borrow from a 401k, or borrow from your home equity line of credit. So that's so budgeting, borrowing more money from one of these three sources, debt settlement, debt consolidation, winning the lottery, inheriting money, dying, being in a major car accident that gets you a personal injury settlement, right? The last thing people think about is bankruptcy. But the reality is that bankruptcy should be the number two thing that anybody considers, because everything else is dangerous and risky. Budgeting is the first way people should get out of debt. If you can budget your way out in 3 years or less, that's what you should do.
So that's the Dave Ramsey way, right? Is that's kind of what?
Yeah, 3 years or less. It's 3 years or less, even though you might, and maybe I used to say 5 years or less. Jay Fleischman is an attorney, friend of mine. He's like, I use 3 years or less so people understand this, the seriousness of it. So I do go with 3 years or less. But if you can't budget your own way out, then the absolute next thing you should do is talk to a bankruptcy lawyer. Why? Because it's free. Consultations are usually free. But number two, you and I went to law school. We are licensed to practice law. We have ethical responsibilities. I have legal malpractice as mandatory in Ohio. I don't know about Florida, but at the end of the day, who else are you going to talk to about debt? Right? Are you going to talk to the payday lender? Right? Lendmark? You're going to go talk to them? Are you going to are you going to get your advice from a debt consolidator? Are you going to get your advice from your bank manager whose job it is to sell you a compounding interest loan? They need to make money off of you, not just once, but every single day. Bankruptcy lawyers are going to make money off of you one time. And I charge $2,000 total. That includes fees and everything. $2,000 known. If my client who was in the debt settlement for $8,000 in 11 months, if he had understood that 11 months earlier, he would already have started his new life and he wouldn't have wasted all that time and money. So we don't borrow more money because, we don't give alcohol to alcoholics. We don't need to give more debt to people who are struggling with debt. It doesn't work. People think, I'll just move this around. You're just moving the interest around and it's still compounding.
Right.
And if you're going to borrow, right, why would you borrow from your home equity line of credit if in Florida and Ohio, your house, I've never had anybody lose a house. Why our equity exemption is so big in Ohio and yours is unlimited. No one in Florida should ever be borrowing from a home equity line of credit to pay credit cards or medical bills or personal loans. That's crazy because the bankruptcy exemptions specifically protect those for you. So everybody's trying to tell you, don't screw with your house, but yet you're going to run on down and take out a home equity line of credit because the bank manager's so nice and everybody at the bank is smiling at you. And you think that's more honorable than talking to a bankruptcy lawyer, when in fact, it's just making your problems worse. So we don't borrow from a 401k because all ERISA qualified retirement plans are completely 100% safe for everyone in every state. It's one exemption that is nationwide. So you have a complete and total protection in your 401k, your deferred comp. You should never be borrowing from those to pay credit cards, medical bills, personal loans before you talk to a bankruptcy lawyer. Because if bankruptcy is going to work for you, we've just saved you your retirement and the equity in your home. Congratulations. You still have a house and you still have a retirement and you can get rid of the debt and you can go start your life again and maybe build wealth and become amazing.
It's quite the vehicle to be able to utilize and get there. And again, the stigma. If we can get rid of that, if people understand that, people file bankruptcy every day. Every day,
Yep.
thousands of
Yep. A
people.
lot of people file bankruptcy every day. And I don't know about you, but I always have for all the years I've been practicing. I talk to a lot of people every week. A lot of them don't file, but I know that a lot of people are struggling. And I don't have any question whenever I go live or I step into a space where there's people, I know deep down a lot of them have debt. Because I've been doing I've filed bankruptcy for lawyers and doctors and politicians and law enforcement, and everybody has debt.
Yep.
And what's so sad in America is that we've made people think that they're bad people for having debt, and we don't take, it is shameful. And so people are more comfortable talking about, menopause symptoms and ED than they are talking about owing your credit card company. And that's what we're doing. We're taking that stigma away so people understand how to save themselves in a very predatory capitalistic economy.
Well, Adrian, I've thoroughly enjoyed the time that we spent together today. Is there anything that you'd want to leave to our viewers or our listeners that we haven't discussed today?
I just want everybody to know that, money is fixable. We can't, money is fixable. There's a lot of things that we cannot fix in this life. There's a lot of things to cry about. There's a lot of things to, that can bring you down. There's a lot of things that can impact your marriage, that can impact your health. This should not be one of them. This is a fixable problem, and it is worth investigating so that you can sleep comfortably at night. It's possible.
Well, Adrian, thank you again for joining us. The Ladylike
Thank
Lawyer,
you.
everybody. And I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks. We're going to rendezvous again in Los Angeles. It's going to be a great time. And for
Yay.
everybody tuning in, I'm Sean DeVries. This is Law Unpacked. We'll see you next time.